From the University of Alaska Anchorage, this is Seawolf Voices, a podcast about the pathways to and from education. I'm your host, Matt Jardin. After a record-breaking season for Seawolf Volleyball, English alumna, former student athlete, and longtime assistant coach Stacie Meisner closed the year with a promotion to head coach. The seventh head coach in program history, Stacie took the reins over from Chris Green, who she played for as early as high school in Nebraska. In this episode, Stacie talks about stepping into the shoes of her mentor, some of her favorite matches as an athlete and as a coach, and how her coaching philosophy builds better people out of players. Stacie, it's so great to see you again. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So first off, congratulations on being named head volleyball coach. That's awesome news.
Yeah, it's been really exciting. Coach Green has been a huge mentor in my life, and I think overall, no one was really happy to see him leave, but, he kind of gave me his blessing, and I know he really believes in me, and so that means a lot going forward, and I'm really excited to, lead Seawolf Volleyball kind of into its next chapter.
So other than, winning, what plans or what benchmarks do you want to hit in the lead up to the season?
I think one of the biggest things, especially with this group that we have coming, is figuring out what kind of team we're going to be. We've got a good group coming back that was part of the team last year, but we're going to have a lot of new players as well. So I think a lot of it right now is figuring out, how do our personalities mesh? How does our playing style mesh on the court? And just figuring out what's going to be the personality and the vibe of this new team. I think it's going to be a really fun process, and I think the players that we have really embrace what Seawolf Volleyball is all about. And so really that's kind of, for things that are happening on the court, those are the things that I think we are really looking for right now.
Apologies, I'm not a sports person, so this might be a really dumb question, but what do you look for when building out a team?
Yeah, for us, it's just about filling out positional needs. There's obviously athletic benchmarks that we're looking at in student athletes, when we're out recruiting for prospective student athletes, so PSAs, we're kind of looking at, how high are you jumping? How hard are you hitting? And there's, some specific benchmarks there. Some of the other stuff, is important too. How are they acting when they're on the bench? Are they a good teammate? Ultimately, it just comes down to, do they want to be here in Alaska? And do they want to be part of what Seawolf Volleyball is all about? So, it's not just thinking about athletically, is it the right fit, but personality-wise, is it the right fit also? I think we're quite a bit different than a lot of other Division II schools. We're not the type of campus where kids are, running home for the weekend when they have time off. Once you're here, you're really here. Mm-hmm. And so, we spend a lot of time with our recruits trying to figure out, is this kid independent enough to be here and be away from family? And then also, are they really going to embrace our family culture? Mm-hmm. Because our players spend a lot of time together and they like spending time together. It's just really about finding that fit, not just athletically, but are they going to fit into our team culture as well?
Mm-hmm. How do new recruits from the lower 48, how have they adjusted in the past? Or how do you guys help integrate them into the team and make sure that they, feel at home?
Yeah, as coaches, there's really not a lot I think we have to do, especially because, we're a fall sport. We start practicing before classes even start. We're 3 weeks out from classes starting. We're in the gym twice a day. We're having meals together. They're already doing those kind of team bonding things inherently as part of our preseason. Mm-hmm. And we really kind of put that responsibility of, making sure everyone feels included on our players. It's really their team every season. And so, yes, as coaches, we're there to help cultivate that culture, but ultimately the players have a big role in setting a standard and deciding what kind of team do they want to be. And yeah, there's just not a lot of work that us as coaches have to do that, because I think, we get kids who have played volleyball for a long time. Mm-hmm. And they know what type of team they like to be part of, and they know what type of team they don't like to be part of. That is pretty unanimous, as far as like, they want good team chemistry. They want to be part of a family. They want to feel loved and respected, and never had a recruit tell me something different than that's what they're looking for. And so I just think we've done a good job of our seniors passing it along to underclassmen. Hey, like this is the type of team we want to have. And all of our new players really buy into that year after year.
That was a good peek ahead. So let's kind of look back. Like, what was it like growing up for you? Were you always into volleyball?
Yeah, I started playing at a really young age. I have an older sister, so when she started, I started, and I was 2 years younger than her. So I was playing like YMCA ball in like second grade, and I just really loved the sport. I actually got to start playing like semi-competitively when I was in fifth grade, because I went to a K-8 school, and we actually had competitive sports starting in fifth grade. So I think that was a huge advantage for me, just to be able to like get the reps and just play a lot, but play for that age group, play at a pretty competitive level, especially like where I live. It's like rural Nebraska. The club volleyball scene wasn't huge there. Not a lot of opportunities outside of those K-8 schools. I don't know. That's where it all started, I guess. And then just from there, continued to play in high school. Did end up playing club during my high school years as well. Coach Green was actually my coach in club.
Oh, wow.
So we've known each other for a very long time. He's known me since I was, yay big. And so, it's always been volleyball. I played other sports along the way, but when it came down to choosing, if there was a conflict, it was always volleyball.
So how did you come from Nebraska to Alaska, to UAA?
Yeah, so I already mentioned Coach Green was my club coach. So when I was growing up, he was the head coach at Western Nebraska Community College, which was a junior college in my hometown. And he had done a really great job building up that program and, was going to the NJCAA national tournament every year, played club volleyball for him. And so when it came time to like decide where I was going to go out of high school, he asked me if I wanted to play for him at WNCC. And they had a great program, and I knew it was a good opportunity. I could go there for free, so that was obviously like a big selling point.
Right.
Want to make school affordable. And so I ended up playing for him for 2 years. And my freshman year, we placed second at nationals. And then my sophomore year, we were the national champion. And so had a really great experience there with him. And then after we won the national championship, then he got the job up here at Alaska Anchorage. And kind of, again, wasn't really sure where I wanted to go. I knew I wanted to keep playing and had visited a handful of schools, but nothing just really seemed to be a good fit. So he asked me to come up on a visit, and I ended up loving the team, and I ended up loving it here in Alaska. And so at the time, talking with my parents before I decided, my dad, it was kind of funny. He's like, yeah, it's just 2 years. Like, go to Alaska. I mean, you already know you like the coach. I think it's a good opportunity for you. And, when else in your life are you going to get the chance to live in Alaska? Right. It's just 2 years. And we still joke about it to this day, because here I am 15 years later, and I've lived here that whole time. So I just really fell in love with it here and didn't really want to go anywhere else.
So when you did come up, you majored in English, and you got your bachelor's and your master's in English. So what inspired you to go that route, to pick English?
Yeah, choosing a major for me was really difficult because there were a lot of different things that I was interested in. I actually started out as a journalism major and then just kind of transitioned over to English, kind of thinking that I wanted to be a professor in English, wanted to go and get my PhD. So that's kind of the path I ended up heading down. But, like I said, once I graduated, I got my master's. Started working a few jobs here and there. I didn't want to leave Alaska yet. I knew I wasn't done here. I didn't want to leave. And so, different opportunities kind of came up, and I was able to stay here. And then the opportunity came to be the assistant coach. And so, it was kind of a long, windy road, I think, to get here and to know that this was the job for me. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't trade any of it.
So talk a little bit more about that. How did you end up coming back as assistant coach?
I think that whole process actually started in 2015, 2016 when Nikki Rose left. So she was my assistant coach. And when she had left, Green actually called me and asked if I was interested in being the assistant then. And, he was very upfront and honest, hey, like, I'm talking to this other coach and it's kind of like between you two. And so I like came in and I interviewed, and like I'm putting air quotes up for those of you that are listening, which is all of you, because, we've known each other so long. And so he interviewed me, but pretty much every answer I gave, he knew what my answer was going to be. And then he didn't end up hiring me. And
come on.
Yeah, right. I'm like,
I thought we were tight.
Yeah. And like, literally, I was like, you called me. Like, so it was just kind of funny. And I totally understood why he ended up hiring Sheldon. But it was kind of in that moment where I didn't get that job that I kind of walked away from that experience. And I was like, wow, I really wanted that. Mm-hmm. And so after that, everything that I kind of did was geared towards being ready and prepared when that opportunity became available again. Mm-hmm. And so I started coaching more at the high school level, at the club level. I started my own club volleyball program through Anchorage Sports Association. Mm-hmm. And I just did everything I could to make myself a better coach. Mm-hmm. And then Green ended up needing another graduate assistant. And so I was like, oh, I would be willing to come back and do that again. So at the time I was working as executive director for Anchorage Sports and was kind of interested in like getting my MBA. So I was like, oh, that's a good fit. Like I can get back coaching with the Seawolves. I can earn my MBA. This will be really helpful for my job at Anchorage Sports. And then when Sheldon decides to move on, because he had always said that UAA was kind of a stepping stone for him, then hey, here I am, I'm ready to step in and, take on that role as the full-time assistant. So that's kind of how it all played out for me. And luckily, I was able to be in that GA spot when Sheldon did decide to leave. Mm-hmm. And then Green did hire me that time for the full-time assistant job.
It makes you wonder, do you think it was Coach Green's plan all along to like tease you a little bit and make you do all those other things, like really get ready for it? And
yeah, maybe, I'd be really impressed if that was his plan all along.
He's playing the long game, man.
Yeah.
He's playing the long game. So you mentioned Anchorage Sports Association, of which you served as executive director for a time. What was it like? Or can you tell me what that transition was like, going from university volleyball to all the sports for all of the people? Because they serve childhood to adult, right?
Yeah, so they've got some youth sports. It's primarily, the youth sports are primarily volleyball, which is the program that I started. So when I started there, they didn't do very many youth sports. It was mostly fast pitch softball. So they would run the high school program through Anchorage Sports. So yeah, it wasn't a huge deal. I think Anchorage Sports' biggest program is slow pitch softball, which I play also. And so that's kind of why I was already involved in that community and ended up kind of knowing about the job. I was serving on the executive board, and then the job became available and I was looking for full-time work. And so it just kind of worked out, and it's just a lot of administrative stuff. So it's not even really about sports. I mean, it is in the sense that we want the people participating to have a good time, but the job is just really about being super organized, making sure that, the organization is financially stable and sustainable. But it was a really fun job. I really enjoyed it. And, if I hadn't moved to coaching, I would probably still be working there.
They never show the administrative stuff, like in the movies.
Yeah, that's not the fun stuff. Nobody wants to see that.
So you talked a lot about Coach Green. Like, what lessons have you learned from Coach Green or like any of your coaches or mentors?
I've learned a ton from Coach Green. I don't even know if I can accurately describe in a timely manner, even really talk about that. I think the thing I always really appreciated about Coach Green as a player is that he always had something productive to say to you. So he was always so great about giving feedback and not being a super emotionally driven coach. I had coaches in the past where, it was kind of all lots of like pep talks, I guess, but not like a lot of substance. And so one of the things I noticed about Green right away playing for him is like when we would take a timeout, he always had something productive to say to help us get the next point. So, and it was never just like, hey, like, you got to do better. Like, let's go team. He was just, his volleyball mind was just so advanced and so skilled that he's just with the X's and the O's and the game plans and the strategies. That's the biggest thing I think I've learned from him is just seeing those things on the court and being able to communicate those things to his players, to help them be successful in games and to help them win games. So that's probably one of the biggest things I've always taken away from him just as a volleyball coach. He's a great person. He's a great person to work with, great mentor, and a great friend.
So less big inspirational speeches and more like actual input and actual strategy.
Yeah, no, don't get me wrong. He had his fair share of inspirational speeches too.
I feel like you have to if you're going to be a coach. Like you have to do the inspirational speech.
Totally, yeah. But I think just compared to other coaches I had, he was always just very strategy driven and very skill driven. And as a player, that's something that I think helped me just become the best player that I could be.
As a player, like how has being a player helped you now as a coach?
Yeah, I think especially at the college level, having played and having been a student athlete, I think there's just a certain level of understanding and empathy that I can have for my players now, having been through it. Like I understand the stress and, the challenges that come along with being a student athlete. But I also understand the joy and, the fun and the relationships that you build throughout that process. And so I think just understanding, both the hard things and the really good things helps me relate to my players in a way that you just really can't if you were never in that position.
So you talked a little bit about, the stress of being a student athlete. So what advice do you have for student athletes who, need help juggling the athletics and the student part?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is don't be afraid to ask for help. There's lots of support. There's lots of support staff. There's lots of resources, and there's lots of people here that are wanting to see you be successful. And so I think the barrier sometimes is that we are afraid to ask for help. We have this maybe conception that it makes us look weak or like we're not smart enough or we're not good enough. But it's really the exact opposite. Smart people ask for help. They understand, when they need additional resources and they're not afraid to ask for it. So I think that's the biggest thing is just asking for help early and often and just knowing that you're not alone. There's people out there who want to see you be successful.
Do you have a favorite game that you've played or a favorite game that you've coached?
As a player, one of the bigger ones that stands out to me is from my sophomore year of college with Western Nebraska, the semifinal game of the national tournament. We were playing Salt Lake City, and they had an incredible team. And, I don't remember exactly what set we were in, but we were down pretty significantly. And we took a timeout. And again, Green was my coach. So we took a timeout and, he's giving his, hey, the X's and O's part of the game. This is what we're going to do out of this serve receive to try to get a side out here. And then he just kind of took this long pause and he looked at all of us. And even though, we were down by like 5, 6, 7 points. It was a pretty big gap. And we needed to win that set to continue. He looked at us and he said, I know you can still win this game. And that was just like an immediate shift in our entire team's attitude. And just knowing that he believed that we could come back from that deficit just really shifted, I think, our entire team. And we did end up coming back and winning that game in 5.
You'll have to see it.
Yeah, it was really incredible. And, then the next night we played Miami-Dade for the championship. And I think we won in 3 or 4. But that game against Salt Lake felt a lot more like the championship game than the game against Miami-Dade did. So, as a player, that's one that sticks out a lot in my mind. As a coach, maybe this is just because it's like recent memory and just happened, but our Pack the House night on senior night this last season against Central Washington was incredible.
And you set a record for that, right?
Yeah, so we set the NCAA Division II record for attendance, 3,888 people in the Alaska Airlines Center, which was incredible. It was an amazing atmosphere to play in. But the game itself was a really great match. Central Washington had a great team this year. And even though we won that match 3-0, it was a tight game. Every single set, was close. I think every set was like, we came down to like 22-22, and then we were able to pull ahead and like win. But I mean, that just the atmosphere of that game, we had a GNAC championship riding on that game. If we won that game, we were more than likely going to be conference champions. Okay. So, there's a lot of pressure on our kids, but they really stepped up to the challenge. They stuck to our game plan, and they really trusted in each other to get it done. And so that's definitely one that's going to be a core memory for sure.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. What is your approach to coaching, or what would you say your philosophy to coaching is?
My coaching philosophy is really rooted in approaching players as a whole person. I don't just want to make them better athletes, better volleyball players, but when they leave my program, I want them to just be better people overall. I really think that we cannot perform physically if we are lacking emotionally, mentally. We can't do the physical things if we're not healthy in those other two areas. And it's not just like, hey, I have this one thing that's really good, but the other two are really falling under. You've got to have all three. So I really try to approach coaching from a holistic way. It's not a transactional thing. It's a transformative experience, and really trying to teach and coach, the whole person. I want to make these kids the best volleyball players that they can be. That's why they came here. But while I do that, I want to make sure they know that I love them and I respect them, and that they mean more to me than just being a volleyball player.
I think it's really helpful to be able to do that, to look at them holistically as well, like in a university setting where the whole point is to grow and expand.
Yeah, and I just, these players come and they are already so competitive, and they want to perform well, and they want to execute at a high level. And so oftentimes, they are even harder on themselves than their coaches are. And so, we spend a lot of time actually in preseason talking about, self-talk and, being kind to ourselves and giving ourselves grace, because a lot of these kids are out here and they are their own worst critic. Yeah, I'm going to push them, and I'm going to, ask the most out of them. But along the way, I got to remind them to be kind to themselves.
Stacie, again, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. It's great to be here.
Seawolf Voices is a production of the University of Alaska Anchorage Office of Advancement and Alumni Relations.